Nancy from Canterbury Trails Farm, and today I'm going to show you how to take applesauce, dehydrate it into a powder, and then store it. We're going to be making applesauce powder. I'm actually working with pear sauce today because I have, if you follow my channel, you know I have that huge over 100-year-old pear tree out at the homestead, and it gives me tons of pears. So I have a ton of, this is actually cherry pear sauce, but it's applesauce, it's the same thing. So what you're going to need is a dehydrator, and these they're like for making fruit leather and other things like that. You can order them from the same company that you ordered your dehydrator from, or you can usually find them at Walmart and stuff like that. I only have 2 of them, so I'm only going to be making 2 worth. I really need to get some more so I can stack them and make more at one time. You could also make this in the oven if you have a good deep cookie sheet, and cover it with wax paper, foil to a certain extent, but you also want to make sure there's no cracks that it can leak out of if you're doing that. If you're doing that, it's going to take a lot longer, and you're going to need to put your oven about 200, 250. Sometimes you need to crack the oven a little bit because you don't want it to burn, you don't want it to scald, you want it to dehydrate. So it's going to almost turn into we're going to dehydrate it to the stage past fruit leather, where fruit leather you want some flexibility to it. This is going to be brittle, so we're going to put it, after we get done dehydrating, we're going to put it in any kind of, you can use a electric coffee grinder, you can use a blender if that's all you got, food processor, like a magic bullet thing, the baby bullet works too, and we're going to grind it into a powder. First thing I'm going to do is pour it. I'm using a quart. Get it on there even as possible. It just helps it dry faster. It's not going to hurt anything if you don't, but it will take, the thicker it is, the longer it's going to take to dry. So that's really great because if you are facing jar shortages and you can't find the jars in your area, you can get a lot more of the powdered product into one jar than you can if it's just already hydrated into the sauce. So for storage capabilities, it's also good for camping, and if you vacuum seal it, it will last indefinitely. And if you're lucky enough to have a freeze dryer, you can also freeze dry it. But it's a great camping food because you can reconstitute it easily, especially if you're dealing with it in small portions. You can also use this in a powdered form when you're baking. You can add it to pies and cakes. So it does have a lot of uses besides just dehydrated applesauce. I'll put the lid on and turn on the dehydrator. And since every dehydrator is a little different, I can't give you exact times on how long this is going to take. So when we come back, we will be looking at the dehydrated product, and then we are going to grind it into the powder. Okay, I let the applesauce or pear sauce dehydrate for I'm going to say about 12 hours. And you want it to get it so it's like the crispy stage, so it's not leathery. And I am using let me get this using a coffee grinder, get it into a powder form. And I'm just going to break it into bits here. We started out with a quart jar of the pear sauce, and I went and got a pint jar to put the powder in because we're going to always have less when you dehydrate it than when you started. And that's the whole reason to do all this is another way to preserve your food, and also to reduce your can storage space and to reduce the use of your cans. I've got a fine grade strainer here that I'm putting over, and the reason why I'm doing that is as I'm grinding the bits of dehydrated applesauce, some of the bigger ones sort of get rejected, and so they have to go through again, so I'm able to sort of sift those out. Powder there. Make sure you put a paper towel or a paper plate underneath of it, so anything that you drop you can just pick up and pour right back in your jar. You don't want to waste any of it. Applesauce is just going to be more of a tan, white to a white tan to a brown color. Remember, I had flavored cherry pear sauce is what I'm using, so mine has a red color to it because of the I have a video on how to make the cherry pear sauce, I think, but you use powdered jello as the flavor in it. You can do strawberry, you can do any really flavor you want to make your apple or your pear sauce flavored. So this was a cherry pear sauce, so that's why we're getting that red coloring in here. So there we have our powder. And like I said, we started out with a quart jar, and we ended up with really like a jam jar. It's half a pint jar from 1 quart. So you can see how you can reduce the use by dehydrating the applesauce. You don't have to use so many quart jars. I'm going to put these food grade moisture absorber packets in there, so to cut down on any clumping, and seal it with the airtight jar. And this is a way you can reuse. When you're storing food, you can reuse your lids. You cannot reuse your lids to can because the seal won't be as good anymore. Some people say they do it, but I wouldn't want to risk having to reprocess my food because I used an old lid. But you can use it for storage and for freezing. You can really use your lids. So it looks like one of those like sand paintings there. This is how you dehydrate to make powdered applesauce. To reconstitute it, if you didn't want to use it in baking, start out with like 1/4 of a cup for like an individual serving, and add a teaspoon of water at a time. Put a teaspoon of water in there and stir it. Put another teaspoon of water until you have the consistency of the applesauce that you want. Some people like it thicker, some people like it runnier. If you're using it in a recipe, do the same thing for the amount. Start with 1/4 a cup and reconstitute it, because when you reconstitute it, you'll have more than when you started out with. So if you need like 1/2 a cup, start with 1/4 a cup until you can pour the reconstituted sauce into the measuring cup until you have the amount you want. But you do have to work in small quantities as you reconstitute, because the powder, there's really no uniform way to make sure you're going to get the same grade powder. It can be finer, it could be more coarse, depending on the sauce, the dehydration level, and the grinder that you're using. So because of the inconsistencies there and the unknown variables that are involved, it's best to start out with the smallest amount and reconstitute, adding to that until you get what you need. So I hope this helps you. Another way to preserve your harvest and reduce your storage space and reduce the amount of cans that you have to use. And it also makes a good baking additive and camp food. So this has been Angie from Canterbury Trails Farm. Thanks for joining us.